Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Kentucky Small Business Development Center's weekly webinar. We're glad you've joined us today. As always, we're going to allow everyone a few moments to join our event. We're going to share some information about the Kentucky SBDC. For 40 years now, the Kentucky SBDC has assisted emerging and growing businesses by providing the professional expertise, tools, and information necessary to make sound business decisions. We do this at no cost to you, thanks to the U.S. Small Business Administration, who co-sponsors our program. Our program is then administered by the University of Kentucky, who partners with the regional universities, colleges, and local economic development agencies. We're part of a national network, America's SBDC, with over 1,000 centers across the nation. You can learn more about us by visiting kybizhelp.com. There you'll find additional resources to help start, fund, and grow your business. If you want to get started with a consultant one-on-one, you can go ahead and email us at info@kybizhelp.com or call us at 888-475-7232. And as always, a recording of today's event will be made available to you later this afternoon. You'll find that in your email box. So if you have any issues with the presentation as far as technical, or you just need to step away, know you're going to have access to the entire recording. I'm Janet Flaw. I'm with the Louisville Center, which is one of 17 centers across the Commonwealth. And moderating today's event are my colleagues from Louisville, Center Director Dave Etkin and Assistant Center Director Tony Sears. Good afternoon.
Hey, Janet.
Hi, Janet.
Hi. How are you folks doing today?
Awesome. It's been a great day today. Great day today. So, we've got a great topic today. It's a very important topic for the success of your business. I'd like to introduce my really good friend, Marcy Young, who's President and CEO of HR Alliance. She has years of experience consulting in HR. And she's a great professional to know because she's basically an all-in-one HR solution, and she'll work with small startups to larger companies. What's important about HR, as we know, is managing people, like finding and retaining good employees, is really a key factor in the success of any company. And Marcy is really awesome at kind of diagnosing what your company needs from an HR standpoint, and kind of crafting an overall strategy to fill those needs. And having known Marcy, I've noticed that, the company she worked with, they can, a good strategy can help control capital costs, reduce labor costs, kind of reduce risks, and improve management information, from an HR standpoint. And so we've really been interested in kind of looking at different things here towards the end of this year, this last quarter, about kind of planning for the upcoming year, and what are those strategies and things that you kind of need to drive your business forward. What I've noticed and what I invited Marcy to come and talk about is company culture. And I think culture of your company and your team is key to the success of your business. And it's so hard to quantify and so hard to get right. I think we've all probably had the experience of being in kind of a toxic culture maybe, and how that really makes it tough to go to work and for the company to kind of progress. So I think that's a really important topic that we need to discuss today. So that being said, I'd like to introduce my good friend Marcy and get her to just take over from here. And let's just get going, right, Marcy?
All right. Good afternoon. I'm so excited to be speaking to you guys today on a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, organizational culture. It's extremely important, as David mentioned, and I appreciate the introduction, Dave. But this topic is something that's of interest to you. Today's going to be a great session. So to get started, what I'd like to discuss with you today is really about session outcomes. What can you expect with the webinar experience today, and what are we going to be talking about? So you're spending 45 minutes to an hour with us today to learn more about organizational culture. What is it? So we're going to define that for you. In my experience, lots of times we're on different pages with what organizational culture actually is. So we'll be defining that. I want to talk about why organizational culture is so important. Again, you're taking time away today to learn those things, and I want to discuss with you what does that look like, and kind of break it down for you and get into the details of it. How to evaluate and build a healthy culture. So if you have a current culture that you've established, we're going to look at the evaluation process of that. And then also, if you don't have a culture established, then we'll talk about how to build a healthy culture and what that means to you. And that's always specific to your company and your environment and what you want it to look like. And then lastly, who is responsible and who does it impact? So who's going to be responsible for leading and guiding that? And then who are the folks that it's going to impact? I believe that you're aware of this, just as a moment for housekeeping, but if you have questions, this is your session today. So I'm going to be very clear about making you aware that if you have questions or any type of comments that you look to add, please use the chat feature. We will be answering questions at the end of the session. I think that's just a way to gather information and collect it at the end so we can answer those questions. But please, please, please feel free to ask questions throughout, send your chats, and we will be getting back to you on what that looks like. So why are we talking about organizational culture today? Like Dave said, it sounds like you guys it's an intricate piece of what you're trying to do and accomplish and what you're looking for. But even more significantly, what's going on in the marketplace today, from the clear division that we're having with multiple things and debates that are going on, including the presidential election. And I'm not here to talk politics whatsoever. However, the implications are very present throughout companies and organizations. As Dave mentioned, I've been doing this for a long time, and having started my business about 6 years ago, I deal with lots of clients on a daily basis and helping them navigate through these things. So I've been, since the pandemic started and a lot of the other issues that we've been looking at, company culture has really kind of just come to the forefront, because employers are trying to figure out, where do we take a stand? What does this look like? How do I communicate these things to my employees? What position do we hold? What makes the most sense for why we're doing what we're doing today? What I want to try and define for you, and again, like I'd mentioned before, when we think about organizational culture, I've talked to multiple people, and I get different opinions as to what it really is. It has to be this way or that way. It's more about specifically who you are. So I found this definition and kind of tweaked it a little bit to make it my own, but I wanted to provide that so we're on the same baseline and understanding of what the session is going to look like and really what a defined culture means. Established by the leaders, so that talks about who, right? Who is responsible, and that it's going to come from the leaders. So if you are a business owner or someone who is leading the company, that is specifically going to come from you, and driven down and communicated, reinforced throughout the organization by various means. So everyone in the company has a responsibility for carrying out the culture, but the defining of the culture comes from the leadership. And whether it's a team or an individual, just depends on the size of your organization and where you are. If you are a solopreneur, clearly it's going to come from yourself. But if you do have a leadership team, that'll be something that you'll develop within that team work to make sure that you are on the same page with that. Also found this too, the culture is a set of living relationships working toward a shared goal. It is who you are because of what you do. And that really will be what we define your company to be. So when you think about who you are as an organization and what you do, it's extremely important when we talk about developing that culture. And for purposes today, we're going to kind of work through the starting process of what it looks like all the way to the end, and how do you implement. So next, we're going to talk about why organizational culture is so important. And I believe that when we list these things here, that we're going to dive in and straight through all four of these top points into further detail. But I believe that knowing the why behind organizational culture and why we're doing what we're doing is just extremely imperative to understanding and why you put so much energy and effort into this. I always compare it to the button on your shirt, right? If you get that aligned, then everything else kind of flows from there. You get that top button aligned. Without an organizational culture, you're left kind of rudderless. And I'll get to that in just a second as well. But your culture impacts everything from employee performance to how you're, but also how you speak to the market with your marketing materials and how you advertise and present yourselves to your clients, how you draw back those things. And we're going to actually dive into each one of these topics in greater detail in just a minute. It is the central foundation on why and how you do business with productivity, attraction, and retention. And we're going to dive into that significantly here. And again, if you've ever gone to any type of seminar on hiring, recruitment, attraction, retention, we could speak for days on that. But we are going to get into some details of that here in just a minute. And it is imperative to the success of the overall health of the company, your people, and your customers. Each one of these are pretty broad topics, but they are right on in alignment with what you need to be doing. So the other reason as to when we take a look at the opposite effect or impact of why an organization culture is important, then we talk about without it, or one that's not been defined by leadership, is a business without a purpose is like a ship without a rudder. And without cultural values, your ship has no anchor. I really like this analogy because we've all used that analogy of a ship before, and you can visualize and say, okay, if I'm heading down a path, and while I might be able to see it in my peripheral, if I can't change the rudder to give me the direction, nor can I anchor, can I really do what I need to do in that ship, right? It's just kind of left to be tossed about. So it says a ship simply floats around with no direction, no destination, and no hope for the future. It cannot guide itself to a destination, nor can it anchor itself and remain in one spot. It simply floats listlessly, so when the wind blows, it is pushed in every direction, going wherever the wind drives it. And what a great definition of what a company can look like without these types of things in place. Understanding your core values, knowing who you are as a business, and then implementing those throughout the organization, communicating them, and then holding folks accountable for that. The other thing that I'd like to talk about is one of the first things that we initially started off with under the why your organization's culture is so important. Your organizational culture actually defines your identity. So as we move through this piece and understanding who you are as a company, a couple things that I want you to look at. One is after each one of these that we're going to discuss, there's going to be kind of a practice, and it's more of an opportunity for you to just to spend a couple of seconds in thinking what this looks like. And you'll have this, I believe that you're going to be receiving this deck of slides for you so you can kind of work through. But if you'll think about what these things are and jot them down, it'd be part of the process of starting to develop your organizational culture. Without having a clear core values established, companies really don't know how to respond to certain things that are going on. Like I'd mentioned earlier, when we talk about the controversy with either the debates or the pandemic or the closing of companies, or, hey, if I've tested positive for COVID, how long do I stay out, and the CDC guidelines and all those things that we can kind of get upset and twisted on which direction to go. Your culture helps you to define who you are so that you know which types of decisions that you can make. I've found that when companies do have that culture established, they're able to identify and represent themselves to their companies and to their employees, rather, so much more easy than if they did not have that established. So your identity and who you are is extremely important in thinking through attributes that describe your organization and why each of those are important to the health and success of your organization. So when you take time to think about your business and why you're doing what you're doing, most of the time you don't get into business or establish a business thinking about what is my culture. It's more about what is my product, what am I producing, how can I make more of it, how can I make this more profitable, which are all extremely important. But rarely do companies start with the intention of a culture. However, if you don't have a culture, The opposite is true, and you'll find that as you continue to grow your business. Without sitting down and really understanding who you are as a company, you really don't have a clear roadmap to know where you're going, how you're perceived, who you want to be, and what the future looks like. You may get there on certain elements, but when you start adding employees and you have employees, it's more difficult from you as an individual to lead things if you don't hire the right folks who are like-minded, if you don't transpose those down to those folks and make that throughout with your customers, your clients, your vendors, and understanding who you are. So taking time in the beginning to sit down, identify who you are, what your core values are and what they look like is extremely important to understand what your culture is going to look like and what's going to drive the business. The next thing we'll talk about is your core values. And core values are ways which you conduct your business, right? It's how you manage your workflow, how you interact as a team, how you treat your customers, and that represents basically who you are and how you believe your business should be run. Your culture is your company's beliefs and actions. So once you've identified in writing your company core values, you want to make sure that what you're looking at, your values, does your company reflect that, right? If you've identified integrity, respect, customer service, right, excellence, those types of things as your core values, you want to define what that looks like and means to your business. So every company's culture is specific to them. And toward the end of this, we're going to talk about how-tos and what could be some examples of what that looks like for you. But everything is specific and customized to your business. You as the owner, or you as the leader, as the person who's going to make those things happen. You're going to filtrate that throughout the organization, and it's going to be in everything you do, from marketing materials to employees and retention to driving the business completely. Everything that you do should always reflect back to your organizational culture. If it doesn't, and if you don't know, which is something we'll get into as well, how are you measuring that, right? How do you know that who you are and that who you've established as your culture is being reflected through your employees and through your identity as an organization? What are you using to measure those things, and then gauge that experience throughout? The next thing that we're talking about is transforming your employees into advocates. So with a clearly defined culture, your employees not only are employees working for you, but they actually become advocates. We talk about celebrating and rewarding employees. And I will say lots of times when I talk to folks about this, they typically will say things like, well, we don't have a budget for that, right? That's the first thing that comes to their mind is when we talk about reward and recognition is, oh my gosh, it's monetary, right? That's something that has to be paid out. And that is not always the case. While it's nice to have a compensation program in place for your folks, reward and recognition or celebratory events are not always monetary. As a matter of fact, I would encourage you to have more than aren't. Just a way to reach out and build that culture of thank yous. I appreciate you. Hey, how about we do these types of things? What does this mean to you? Those are examples of how you could actually celebrate your employees. The other thing that's extremely important too is that if you are going to develop a reward and recognition program for your staff, then I would not do it in a vacuum. Meaning that reach out to your folks. My experience again has been when employers try to create a reward and recognition program without getting a pulse of their organization, they attempt to do things well intended and maybe we'll spend some money with those things, only to be very, very frustrated because all the time, energy, effort, and possibly money going toward that ended up with employees who were not happy with the overall results of it because they weren't aligned with what their employees wanted in the first place. Just because they feel like something like an employee would want maybe not be what they actually need. For example, one company rolled out a total reward and recognition program focused on what the leadership team assumed would be welcomed and rewarded, meaning that they offered them or reduced their compensation structure and put it toward other programs that were not valued by the employees. They were doing birthday celebrations and different things that were taking away from time that wasn't relevant, and really their employees wanted to be more rewarded in areas that they didn't identify. And then there's often times that we find that employees don't like public recognition, but then there's some who do. So just understanding what your folks look like, knowing that you're never going to be able to please everyone, but at the same time, if you could take a pulse and maybe a survey of what your folks actually like, it's going to help. The bottom line is that employees want to feel like they matter. When they feel like they matter, they're more likely to become culture advocates, and they contribute to the culture philosophy. So they become advocates and then ambassadors of the company. This always leads to employee engagement, meaning that they want to do more for the company. They're going to go above and beyond. They're going to work later hours. They're going to take it to the next level, maybe do more of a thought through process. They're not going to be as easily tired or frustrated when things have to be changed or maneuvered around. They really take a sense of accomplishment and feeling like they're part of something. So stressing the reward and recognition or the celebratory pieces, simple thank yous go a long, long way. The part of the practice is for you to really think about what happens to an employee morale when recognition and celebration are absent. So the opposite of doing that, what happens? They're kind of left to their own to think that maybe they're valued, maybe they're not valued. Do they appreciate me? Am I on the right track? Is this something that is good for the company? Is this good for my teammates? How do I know that? And again, all of that comes with the leadership and direction of your organizational culture, valuing what you believe in. The next topic that we're going to discuss, and again, these are not to be all inclusive. Like, I've identified about 7 different areas in which I feel are the most important and relevant when it comes to organizational culture, but there are many others depending on what you are as a company and what you're trying to build to be and what you're trying to grow to be. And those are things that certainly I'm happy to walk through with anyone if you need some assistance with. But identifying broadly, in my experience, as to what are some of the major areas in what organizational culture would be. The next one, employee attraction, retention, and engagement. And my goodness, like I said before, when I was kind of giving the introduction, I could spend hours talking to you about this. It is such a broad and deep topic. But for the purposes of today, I'll be specifically focusing on it being aligned with organizational culture. So we're going to get into a little bit of what that looks like, but the focus is going to be in the organizational cultural piece of it. So if you are not someone that's being identified in the market as an employer of choice, or maybe you're a startup company who doesn't really have an identity in the market, this is a great opportunity for you to establish who you are as an organization, so that when you're going out and up against your competition, you can identify why you stand out and what does it look like. And a culture is huge. So not only do you have to be competitive from a compensation standpoint or total comp standpoint, but the cultural piece of it will win it over every time. So if you have an environment that is welcoming, that employees where they feel like they're part of a community or a family, and that you're hiring folks that are like-minded in that way, that is going to be extremely huge for you setting yourself apart from your competition and being able to attract and ultimately retain your staff. So when you think about attracting top talent, and you know that you're going, hopefully you've looked out and seen what your competition is. You know you're going up maybe a more well-established company, or maybe they pay at a higher rate, or they do things differently. But if you can offer an environment that is specific to you, what your culture is, it's been clearly defined, and then you start targeting folks for their talent, skills, and abilities, but are like-minded along with your culture, you're going to have yourself a really good hire. And that's going to lead to overall retention. And then you just duplicate that over and over and over, and you continue to build your culture upon that. You're going to keep pushing that out and communicating continually and likely throughout your company with employees. And then they're going to start holding each other accountable for those things, because if you're hiring folks like that, they're going to want to be surrounded by other folks just like that, as the same as themselves. So interesting enough, studies have shown that when top performers have been asked what keeps them at their company, the answer is always the people. I don't think that this is a surprise to anyone. When the surveys are conducted, and while I think there's plenty others on that list, this is the top one, right? We retain people because of who they report to and who they work with. It's always the people first. So when you are thinking about how am I going to make this business a success, right? Not only is it what you're delivering, the services you're offering, the products you're developing, how you're communicating to the market, but now how do I deliver this? And without people, you can't deliver it, right? Always talk to my clients and say, what is your largest asset? That's your staff, your people. And what is your largest expense? The answer is still the same. So putting your efforts and toward those things, the ones your largest asset, your largest expense, putting your efforts toward that, and monetary efforts as well, making sure that you are attracting and retaining those people, putting your organizational culture and structure behind what you're doing so that everyone understands what that is so important in making that happen. So if you think about the opposite of that, without it, you're going to not do well with your competition in the market. You're not going to be found. You won't attract people. You won't retain them. You're going to have a revolving door, and they certainly won't be engaged. So getting this, again, getting that button right at the beginning, making sure that you are getting your organizational culture straight from the get-go is extremely important. So as far as a practice, again, I want you to look at areas that you struggle with. If it's attraction, retention, engagement, if it's some or all of these, and then do you know why, right? Making sure that you understand what the areas are and why you struggle with that. That's data that is just irreplaceable. Understanding what it looks like, you can constantly focus and retweak and grow it back. And I am going to try and be mindful of time, so we'll move to the next slide. The next topic that we're going to talk about is the cultural onboarding. So if you are onboarding folks that is not matched with your culture, there's going to be some issues with retention, no doubt. So I found this too, and it's so true. People fail in new jobs because of a poor fit, poor delivery, or poor adjustment to change down the road. And it's from Forbes magazine. And this is just assuming you've made all the hiring decisions right that are aligned with your company culture. You've established that, you've got it all together, and you've got your interview questions, you understand who you are, what the culture is, and you're driving all that. Then the onboarding program should assimilate them into the organization, which is going to accelerate their progress, make them engaged, and it's going to retain them overall, right? So they're going to deliver and adjust accordingly. If you are not conducting onboarding program, I would encourage you to do so. If you're not following up with your newly hired staff members 30, 60, 90 days, 6 months, a year, I would encourage you to do so. That is valuable information to collect with your employees along the way. It helps them feel a part. It's going to help you to understand where you fell, where you maybe didn't meet the mark, or maybe there's a gap in an area, or maybe you felt like something was going to land a certain way and it didn't. It just always helps you to redirect and guide so that you understand exactly which direction you're headed in, what worked, what didn't work, what is important and imperative to your folks, and then to redevelop and reprogram what you got going on in your onboarding. So think about what your onboarding program reflects. If you don't have one, please, would encourage you to develop that. And then how often do you check in with your newly hired staff? What does that look like? And checking those types of things. So, and the next topic is cultural team building. Again, depending on the size of your company, Team building for small companies might not be nearly as hard. However, when you think about how many hats you're wearing, how many different departments you're representing, lots of times within the one person, it can be very difficult. So you might have your own personal team building amongst yourself, but in a small business, especially, you have to be very intentional about communication. And again, everything that you do should be driven by your organizational culture, right? So everything that is being interacted on a day-to-day basis, month-to-month basis, any type of interaction, any decisions that are being made should come from that central focus of who are we as a company? Does this represent who we are? And if it doesn't, then you probably need to redirect and re-guide. But as far as team building, when the culture is clear, different perspectives can align with common purpose. So it allows you to work together more effectively, more efficiently, in alignment with the culture. When you set or when you have your organizational culture, it always sets that expectation for how people are to behave. Lots of times we find the interaction with people and the engagement or lack thereof within a team falls with unclear expectations from an organization as a whole. What do we expect people to do, and how do we expect them to interrelay and interact? Is it collaborative? Are we looking for someone who's going to be more cooperative and collaborative? Are we looking for somebody who's going to be more innovative? Do we know how to build a team? Do we have all parts in the areas that we need to be inclusive and making sure we're making the right decisions, from execution to innovation to folks who are going to be more craftsmen and intricate, detailed part of that team? Culture can break down boundaries between your silos. So any kind of teamwork that you have, the culture and defining what that looks like, having the clear expectations, actually breaks down those departmental silos or even individual silos within communication efforts. It guides decision making and improves your workflow. Without it, you're not going to have clear direction, and the opposite can occur. And working in a toxic organizational environment is not good. If we're rowing down the river in the wrong direction, we're going to never meet our destination. So if you think about putting together a team, even if you have all the pieces together, but folks really don't understand how they're supposed to communicate and what's expected of them, there's things that are going to be lost. People can have their feelings hurt. People can be dismissed or feel outplaced or not be included or not be allowed to speak because you have someone who's dominating the environment. So all of these things and setting the expectations are really helpful in the beginning to understand what it looks like for your team environment, for your company as a whole, and how to work together. So questions for you: how well do your employees work together as a team? If you do have to have a team environment, and again, I assume with small businesses, most of the time in my experience is that you are a team. The small business itself is a team because you're so small and you're intricate and you really count on each other and rely on each other for everything. So that's your team environment. Are there any silos or signs for a toxic environment? Certainly do that check. Look at it and see, are there issues that we're coming up with? Right? And you don't have to solve them at that moment, but at least identify that this isn't really good. This isn't working quite the way I expected it to, or it's not right. Then we can start to take a look at, okay, why is that? What's in place or what's not in place that's allowing that to fall down. But start by identifying if there is a toxic environment. Maybe it's just a breakdown. Maybe it's not reached to the level of toxicity, but there's just a breakdown in communication or a breakdown in expectations, which happen if it's not clearly defined. And then we can start to work on how do we fix this? And there's always a fix. There's always a solution. It can be anything from, miscommunication and being more effective with that, clear communications. Sometimes it's not hiring the right fit, right? You've got someone who's creating some of that toxicity, and maybe they're just not the right fit for your team. But when you have a clear organizational culture, it helps you to identify that much quicker and understand what direction you need to go in much faster. So. And then the other question that you want to think about is, do you understand how to actually build an effective team? Do you know all your intricate players and what it looks like, right? Do you have everybody on the bus in the right positions, doing the right things? identified and aligned the way they should be for everybody to be effective. And those things are learned for sure. So think about those things when you are working through your process and trying to understand what your team looks like from an organizational culture perspective. The next thing we're going to talk about is employee performance and well-being. And this, when we hear employee performance, lots of times we think of a set of deliverables and goals and objectives that are typically measured at the end of the year. And while this is true, it's only part of the outcome that should be measured, and it should be an ongoing process. So goals, objectives, KPIs, everything that we've learned throughout business, school, or even our own experiences of how we develop and understand performance from an employee most likely is true. Defining that for your company and your culture can mean something totally different. And that's something that you want to be very specific with and building that out for your company. So with employee performance and well-being, you want to make sure that you are involving that employee, right? The clear, I can't stress enough, right? The clear expectations from the very beginning of who you are as a company, and then what you want that employee to be as within the company and then within that position. Being clear of those expectations are extremely important, helping with a balance of both areas, right? That gives you a healthy culture to understand that. We talk about core values, and then also core competencies for employees should be aligned directly with your values of the company and the organization. So competencies for an employee's performance, the competencies are the behavioral components, right? Identifying what those look like. So not only can you have, or not only should you have an employee who's performing very well, you should also have them aligned in their competencies or behaviors that make sense with your culture, that are completely in alignment with your culture. Many times when we go to look at someone who's on a performance improvement plan or is not successful in delivering either performance or their behavior's not aligned, I can't tell you how many times that I've had management say to me, hey, I've got a top performer. They're fantastic, but their attitude or their behavior is just not working, and it's toxic to our environment, right? So how do we manage to all of those things? And it's identifying the very beginning of who you are as a company, and then understanding the position and the role, and tying that to the not only the performance but also the core competencies to what that should look like for the organization. The well-being of the employee is completely tied to all of those things. It's a holistic approach to the employee, right? Making them more human. And that they're not just there for a job, but they're actually a person who's trying to do a job and trying to bring who they are into this position. So identifying in the very beginning what you're looking for as an organization, what you're looking for in the position, on behavioral elements for both, and they all should be tied. And then communicating that clearly to the employee, making sure that they are aligned in the role that they have, and then tracking that and communicating with the employee. So the other thing that I'd mentioned before was not to just have a once a year check-in, right? So this should be an ongoing engagement with that employee and all the employees who report to you, whether that is on a day-to-day basis, because there should be some interaction, or if that is on a structured 30, 60, 90-day touch-in, it should be an ongoing communication with your employee, helping them to understand where they are, what it looks like for them to be headed in the right direction, things that maybe aren't headed in the right direction, or that they are not performing so well with, or maybe not behaving so well with, making them aware of that. If you're doing these things on a continuous basis, it minimizes not only the hard discussion or decision that you have to make when it comes to their performance and having to write them up or having to have a corrective action, but it helps point them in the right direction, right? So they can be more consistent and aligned with what they're doing, what your expectations are. So continuing to have that voice with them on an ongoing basis. and it helps to shape the work environment for them. It gives them a well-being and sense of accomplishment and being an ambassador for the company. So some things to think about: how are you measuring your employee performance and well-being? What does it look like on that end? Are you having those touch-in bases with those employees? And then, does it align with your company culture? Extremely important to make sure all of those things are in alignment. And the last few things that we're going to talk about, and we're going to get down to, is the hows, right? So those are the things that I've identified as the areas that I feel are significant when you are developing company culture, what it looks like, and the implications if you don't. Now to talk about how to create a healthy culture. If you don't have any core values identified or a company culture identified, these are some ideas and suggestions as to what that can look like. So again, being very specific to you and who your company is. Not all of these will make sense for you, and nor do you have to identify and adopt all of them, but it's some ideas for you to kind of think about. So creating a positive culture, and I think everybody would say that they want a positive culture, but what does a positive culture mean to you? What does it look like? Right? And some areas it's going to make more sense for mentoring abilities and having folks to be mentored from and to. And then make sure employees are comfortable collaborating with colleagues at all levels. Those are some ideas for you. And then encourage one-on-one meetings between various roles and teams. So that helps break down the silos and helps you understand what page everybody's on, and makes for effective communication. Create a culture of passion. And this we're talking about, I'm very, very, very passionate about every company having its own identity and its own culture that is specific to them. So whatever it is you're passionate about, whatever it is that's driving you and your business, identify what that looks like. Your mission, it goes deeper than just revenue, right? It should, and it should be able to drive that. And your employees, the folks that you hire, are going to know and feel and sense that, right? So who you are, identifying that and just pushing that out to your organization is going to be huge in who you actually bring on board and who you retain. Make sure you emphasize your corporate mission, and hiring like-minded people. It's going to enforce the importance of what you do and foster self-sustaining culture of your success. The passion part of it, I definitely find that with business owners, right? If you've got your own business, there is not going to be a single more person more passionate about the business than you. But if you have that passion and you can help push that down through the mission, you're going to have some good folks who are going to help deliver and drive that for you. The next one is create a culture driven by customer success. We certainly all want our customers' satisfaction, and what their success looks like is always different and identified differently. A team that works together with a collective goal to improve customer experience will create an internal culture of collaboration and mutual success, and that is extremely true. So if you're looking to lead your company by customer success, certainly you're going to want to follow and identify with this definition. Create a culture of support and improvement. So you in order to have your folks feel supported, you certainly want to make sure that they're appreciated, and making sure you're investing in them, that you're having your one-on-one meetings, that you're providing them that rewarding recognition that they've identified, making sure that you're removing obstacles and that you've equipped them for continual growth. So any type of employee engagement or development on their part, and it's going to help the company to improve. Some other options for you are create a culture that prioritizes individual development. So it's focused on the employees, right? So from their perspective, what's important to them, right? What makes the most sense for them to be developed on their professional end, and individually, if it's a professional or personal. And that's major factors for them contributing to their success. So what is important to them will drive them. Understanding what those things are in the beginning always helps. And then create a culture that embodies diversity inside and out. So you want to make sure that you don't have any type of diversity or biases for any kind of trainings or any kind of conversations. And even though they're not intentional, sometimes they can be unconscious. So just look at those things when you're creating the diversity piece. When you're creating a culture based on a cause. So lots of times I see this in nonprofit groups, right? They've got that mission and there's a cause for what they're doing. Not always just nonprofits. So it could be specific to any company, but so support your employees' interest by providing opportunities to volunteer. It starts the passion on a project and implement programs that incorporates them into a team as a goal, but it allows them to use their passionate piece and sometimes compassionate piece to the business, and allows them to be even more of an advocate for the company. Creating a culture around transparency, I think we can all appreciate that, making sure that we are very open and honest about who we are, having open conversations, that open door policy that we're all so familiar about hearing, making sure that we're really living that out, right? So if an employee, if we do say that we're having transparency and an employee comes to you with something and you learn about it, how are you going to handle that? What are you going to do with it? Making sure you respond appropriately and react appropriately, that is in alignment with your culture and what you're saying that you're gonna do, that you actually do, walking the walk and talking the talk. If you are going to be transparent with everything, make sure your leaders, it starts with them first. Having open conversations and a flow through for out the organization of what that communication looks like. A few more: create a culture that prioritizes individual development, and then create a culture that fosters cross-team collaboration and accountability. So when you have accountability between your teams, and again, as a small business, you may be wearing the multiple hats like I talked about. So you're going to make sure that there is an open door for that. Building a company culture where teams rely on one another for your collaboration, and everyone's successes and failures are interlinked. So you win together, you lose together, right? You're a team, and you build those things throughout, focusing on your culture. And then also authenticity and trust, and that's huge. The authenticity is part of that transparency, and then it leads to building trust. So embracing individual factors that make every employee unique, and it creates a more inclusive environment where people can be frank and provide feedback and recommendations. But this type of environment is what we all will really long for, is creating an environment of trust, where you feel very comfortable about, no matter what it is that we need to share, no matter what it is we need to work through, that we trust our team to count on us is going to work with us, is going to pick us up maybe when we don't have proper resources or talent or skills or abilities, that we're going to work together and figure those things out. All equal a healthy environment. So in conclusion, a couple things to remember, and looking at the timing, and I think we're going to be good to answer questions at the end. But a couple things to remember is that regardless if you have specifically identified or defined what your company culture is, please know that you do have one. Many times I will meet with clients, and they will tell me that they've not identified their culture, and that they don't have one, and that they're looking for me to help, which is perfectly fine. But I do like to always remind them that you actually do have a culture. The unfortunate part is that you've not defined that for them. They've defined that amongst themselves. And many times when we have companies who have a culture that's been allowed to define whatever it is, kind of with the wind, right, with the ship without the rudder and the anchor, then there is some toxicity, and there is some unclarity, and there are folks who are ready to jump ship because they don't know where they're headed and what's expected of them. So defining that culture is extremely important, knowing that every company has a culture, and that the leadership really should be the person who's instrumental in defining what does that look like. So be very intentional about when you're going back and looking at these things today, and I hope that you do. I hope you go back and you look at your company and you say, okay, who am I? And am I really identifying who I am to internal and external, right? And then being very intentional about what that looks like. Am I making it happen? Am I doing what I'm saying I'm doing? And always focusing back to that. So I really hope that you do those things. Organizational culture is the heart of the business, right? It's the behavior and it's the heart. It really has that passion behind it. Like, who are you? What do you want to do and what do you want to be? It defines who you are and how you do business. So wherever your heart is, that's where you're going to be leading. And I know it's the soft side of it, but it's the things that I love about it. So it's about the people, right? Largest asset, largest expense, big heart. Put your focus toward that. Your people are the value of your business. Without that, you cannot make it work. So focusing on your people and the heart and taking care of them is how you're really going to lead and how you're going to make things major impact. Without defined organizational culture and core values, a company has no foundational grounding or identity for who it is or what it will become. And it's a very, very true statement. If you don't define it, you really don't know where you're headed. And maybe you'll end up there, maybe you won't. How you get there will be tough. It'll be a long road to hoe, but if you absolutely, in the beginning, look at this and put things together and in place and enjoy communicating that out because it's who you are, right? Then you don't get exhausted from it and you just allow those things to work for themselves. You put the plan in place and then work the plan. So those are the things, again, I hope that you take away with you today, that you remember, the importance of an organizational culture, what it is, why you're doing it, how to actually implement it, and then who is responsible for it. One of the last things I want to talk about and maybe introduce to you, or provide for you rather, I should say, is a checklist or a list of questions that will also help those juices flowing. They give you an idea of what is it, where can I start, or where can I start? Get some thoughts in your mind as to, am I doing this right? And does this really reflect who I am as a company and what I want this company to look like? So it's a great opportunity for you to go back and take a pulse on that to see who you are and where you're going. And what do you want to do? Sometimes you may need to redefine and reestablish it. So, with that, I think I'm going to finish with that. Would love to open up for any type of questions that were asked.
Yeah, so that was great, Marcy. That's such a tough subject. You handle it really well.
Thank you.
So I need to want to ask a quick question here. Because a lot of the culture elements that you've spoke to kind of depend on building something where people can collaborate, and a lot of people in employees and people in organizations are inherently competitive people. And how do you balance that, being competitive and being collaborative at the same time? Are there tools or techniques, or what would you do to, somebody's developing their culture to kind of balance that out if they have a very competitive group of folks?
I think that's a really good question. And I'd like to say that doesn't happen, but you're exactly right. It does in pretty much every business. And I apologize. I'm trying to get out of the sun here. Not always the case for me, but at this particular time. It does happen consistently in businesses. You have, everybody's different and they're unique, right? And learning how to bring teams together and people together and have them communicate effectively is extremely important. There are multiple ways we go about doing this. One of the ways that's helpful to me and I've implemented many times with my clients is, and don't cringe when I say this, but it's profiles or personality assessments. It really helps to identify the awareness of a certain individual. Lots of times we don't have self-awareness, right? And we may think that we're communicating in a certain way, but ultimately we're not. And there's a particular one that I really like and that I use with my groups, and it helps with team working and team building, but it starts with the individual and the self-awareness part, helping them to know who they are and how they communicate, how they are received, and then helping them to understand how others are received. So even if we do know ourselves sometimes, we don't always know how other people receive us, or how they are expected to receive themselves. Because many times I find that we get ourselves, we've done enough research on ourselves, and maybe we do have some self-awareness, but not everybody's like us, right? We're all different and we're all unique. And a very key point to remember is, if I'm trying to deliver something, how does that other person receive? Right? We can deliver all day long. If we don't know how the other person's going to receive it and be able to translate and take that in, it's going to land flat, or it could be offensive, or it could never drive the points that we want it to. So, you start with the end in mind and say, okay, what am I trying to convey? And what is it I want someone to accomplish or get from this and as an outcome? And if I don't know how they receive, the chances of them actually getting it and delivering on that, either it's going to take a lot longer to get there, or it won't happen at all. So those are big pieces there. I mean, that's a loaded question from a perspective of how we could actually get them to do it, but there's a process really in helping that happen. I've been doing this long enough that I could probably tell you folks assessment results, but that's not the case for many other people, right? So business owners, that's not what they got in business to do. So those are our tools to help them and help guide them, and part of things that we actually work through with clients and help them with, so that they can better fill their folks through certain processes and work together as a team. Did that help?
Oh yeah, very much.
Okay.
Very much. Along that same kind of line, so let's just say that you're not the top leader, but maybe you're one of the leadership team, and you've kind of identified there may be some toxicity in the culture, or there's no culture. I mean, how do you help your leader to, maybe get some recognition? There's some things that you can do to kind of, work down. What would you say to that?
So you're talking about managing up? Is that what you're saying?
Managing up, yes.
Okay, yeah. So, well, again, without an organizational culture, it's going to be very difficult to do that, right? But if you are someone who is in an organization, and I think I'm answering your question correctly, but correct me if I'm wrong. If you are in an organization with someone where you do feel like it's a toxic environment and there hasn't been leadership or guidance or direction, you feel very suffocated. And most of the time you're ready to jump ship, right? You're like, managing up is a whole technique by itself. And if you haven't learned that, it can be very frustrating. So one of the ways that we encourage folks to do, if you don't have leadership who's supporting you, is to help them to understand and we're both maybe targeting the same outcome, but we're not going about it in the right direction or the same way. How do we get to that? Starting with the end in mind, and then helping them channel through that to say, okay, that was maybe my idea, and I can run with it. I don't know if that helped your answer your question or not.
Yeah, that was good. We do have some questions in the chat. Tony, you want to grab a question or two for us?
Sure. Excellent presentation, by the way, Marcy. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
So Katan Patel, he's first asked, do you have any good readings or books that he could get his staff to read to help understand the key points that you left here?
That's a very good question. I think there are so many of them out there. What I'd like to do is maybe come back with a list of some top ones, because when I think about it, it's pieces that are kind of fragmented that I've used, quite honestly, because I've been doing this for so long, not everything is all inclusive, but would like to give an answer to that and something that's going to get them closer to those pieces, and maybe some help from that end so they can engage his folks.
Okay. Well, then he also has a question about personality tests. He wants to know, is there any certain personality tests that you would recommend so he can better understand his team and key managers?
Yes, and this, again, I've been doing this for a while, and what I have vetted to be reliable and valid, right, as my favorite tool is the predictive index. It's the PI. It's been around for a very, very, very long time, and in my personal opinion, it's about the only one that you can't game, meaning that there are others out there that they're asking questions that you can psychoanalyze. Or you could answer in certain ways to make yourself look better or come across in a different way. And this particular one you can't game. And in my 20 plus years of doing this particular assessment, I have found it to be extremely accurate. And the only time that it isn't accurate is when I have got equal, and it can go for any type of position, from blue collar work to white collar. It really doesn't matter what the role is, the industry is. It really does. And developing individuals for leadership development, for hiring, retention, promotions. I mean, I use this tool for everything.
Is it expensive?
I'm sorry?
Is it expensive?
It can be, however, through the services that we offer, it's part of the program that we offer. If you retain us, it's definitely part of
COVID world where so many people are working independently from home. What suggestions do you have for organizational leaders who want to grow and improve their company culture while everyone is working separately?
Such a good question. It is so difficult now, isn't it, to try and engage? Oh my goodness. So it's specific to your culture, right? You have to look and see who were you before COVID hit, and right, what are your core values? If you have those in place, what you can start to do is really redefine, and that's what we've been doing for our companies, redefine, okay, now what does it look like to make outreach? And I've got ideas and suggestions all over the place, from looking at the culture, but again, soliciting from your employees, looking at them. I can give you examples. I've got some clients who have pizza parties, right, with their staff. They deliver pizzas to their home. They get on Zoom and they eat the pizza together, right? They kind of engage that way. So I can give you so many examples, but you have to decide what works for your culture, right? So there's some groups that are going to say, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? I have to eat pizza with these folks and this is not what we used to. Right. So you end up doing what I was telling you. Like if you're going in the wrong direction, what you're attempting to do, you're frustrated because you're like, hey, I made that effort and now it's landed flat. So solicit from your folks. What do you want? Like, what would make sense to you? Is a weekly engagement good enough? Is a daily engagement good enough? What type of engagement do you have with your folks, and what's going to motivate them? And honestly, the biggest piece is asking them. Find out from them directly what's going to make sense. And then be creative, right? Once they kind of give you some ideas, be creative. Keeping in mind, you're never going to satisfy everybody. So if you got 9 out of 10 people, go with it. And then reach out to that one person and try to figure out how you can engage them, right? Don't leave that person out, but just keep moving forward. So good question.
Yeah.
No, I think that's wise advice that you offered. So yeah, you should always ask first. So. The next question comes from Anne. She says, Marcy, are you aware of particularly trusted sources that are doing market research on these questions of turnover and retention in company culture?
Am I aware of the sources that I've used? Is that what she's at?
I think she's trying to find out, like, if there's trusted sources she could actually use to do market research on these subjects of company culture and turnover.
Okay, yeah, and nothing more than my Google research that I've done and my experience, right, with my clients. So I use a lot of things without identifying it, of who the companies are. I use a lot of things from my experience and lots of touches with my clients. So I'm out there all the time working with them. And when I do, that becomes my resource, if you will, of my engagement. And then I do solicit from other HR professionals and practitioners who are doing some of these things, and then my own research with SHRM and other areas that I kind of pull all of it together and get a broad understanding and knowledge of what it looks like in the marketplace. So I probably would be a good resource for you, but then there are other things out there as well that I can point you to, and yeah, for sure.
Something that just comes to mind, if I could jump in, is looking into benefit corporations. This is kind of a new legal structure. I've written a couple articles on this, and it seems that that type of organization that kind of focuses on employee stakeholders and other things kind of really drive retention up, and it's pretty interesting stuff. So I can share that with everybody.
Great. I'd like to see it too.
So, Dave, that kind of handles all the questions in the chat.
Okay. All right. We're a little bit over our time anyway, I guess. So, Marcy, this is awesome. I really appreciate that. And I just want to let everybody know Marcy's a really great resource. And please reach out to her if you need some help with your staffing and your culture, because culture is the heart of every growing organization, I believe. So. Tony?
Yes, Dave.
Words of wisdom as we say goodbye.
I want to tell everyone out there to have a happy and safe and healthy day. And Marcy, you were awesome. Thank you so much for being a part of our webinar today.
Yeah.
Thank
absolutely.
you all. I really appreciate the opportunity. And if there's anything I can do to help anyone, just please let me know.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. And this afternoon, we'll have your replay recording for you, and also the slides and the files as well. Probably about 4 o'clock by the time we get around to it. And please reach out to us if we can help you. I'm so glad you came today. Marcy, thank you again.
Thank you.
Tony, we'll see you soon. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
All right. Everyone, have a good day, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.